Well, good evening, everyone. And welcome to our class tonight here with Guy Finley. This is our Wednesday Discovery Wednesday class, and today is 10/25/23. In case you're seeing this not live, so we want to welcome you in the room here. And if you have a cell phone, please turn it off or put it on silent mode now. And welcome to you online. Thanks for joining us tonight. Our class will be, Guy will give about a 60-minute talk. We'll give a 5-minute break and then about 25 minutes of Q&A where you can be involved with Guy. And if you want to contact us on whatever platform, you can go to the chat box or to the question box, and we will, Kate will take it behind the scenes there, and we'll get it to me, and I'll get it to Guy, and we'll have a discussion here on the second part of class. And if you have any technical issues, not you people here, I don't want to hear about any of your technical issues, just the people online, as I point up to the camera, let us know. You can always reach Kate at support@guyfinley.com on an email, or just go to your chat box or question box, and we'll help you the best we can. All right, let's get started with tonight's class. Here is the topic. Free yourself from the painful struggle hidden in this unseen act of self-sabotage. And tonight's key lesson reads, the inevitable outcome of all unconscious self-compromise within ourselves, but primarily in relationship with others, is to reach a kind of critical mass of resentment that then spills itself out on others in words and deeds too soon enacted and too late regretted.
Hello. Wouldn't that be something if every time you were somewhere or with somebody, it really was as if you'd never been there before? There'd always be a fresh energy, as opposed to what we experience now, which is a lot like a treadmill. I think there should be so many questions that a man or a woman, a sincere man or woman, asks themselves, that it's somewhat boggling to the mind that the questions don't appear. Like an example, how many times have I acted against myself and had no idea whatsoever that I was doing that? And the reason I had no idea that I was doing that is because while I was doing it, I was fairly well confirmed and convinced in my action, given the reaction I had to whatever brought that character or quality out of me. And yet everything just goes on. I want to talk to you about why everything goes on the way it does. Most of you won't remember that song from a long time ago, something's happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. You remember that much, right? And it's still the same. There's a man with a gun over there. And for the last 4,000 years, there's a man with a gun over there. There's a threat of some kind. And I feel endlessly compelled to protect myself from whatever it is that's perceived as that adversary to me in the moment. And again, one of the questions that one would ask but doesn't is, well, let's see, my great parents and their great parents and the parents before them and every human being on the planet has lived exactly the same way that I live now. They just did it in different ways, different times, but the same constant misinterpretation of the events around them, producing a mistaken action. And the way you can know it's a mistaken action and it's done nothing to change the sense of being in a position where something seems set against you. It's time for those of you who want to grow up to start realizing what it is that is actually set against you. Because if you knew, you wouldn't be still fighting. You'd have resolved it. You'd have overcome it. And as you'll see, the task isn't to overcome anything. The task is to realize a consciousness that is forever setting itself against itself and not knowing it's doing so, and unable to win the battle because it's an interior conflict literally between one order of mind and another order occupying the same space and at war with each other. Does that sound familiar in today's day and age? Occupying the same space and at war with each other? It's unbelievable. And everybody pointing. Ever so briefly, because I need to do so, and maybe I should do what I always do. Hello to you who are joining us from out there in the world, wherever you are. I'm glad that you're here. What time or day it is doesn't make any difference. The question is, how interested are you in coming to an end of what we have euphemistically called self-sabotage for this talk? We talked about one form of self-sabotage on Sunday. And if you weren't here, I urge you to go back and listen. I urge you to listen to all the talks, where we pointed out and fairly proved that there's no such thing as a moment in time. Oh, what's that? Why is that like that? There's no such thing as a moment in time until all of time is collapsed into a single thought. Everything that exists, past, present, and future, is collapsed into a single thought about whatever that consciousness has reacted to. So in that moment, the whole world, all of the possibilities, in a laser point that in order to exist as the point of pain or promise requires someone holding a laser pointer so that the identity is inseparable from the sense of self that has taken place when all of the possibilities are collapsed into, oh no, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What does this mean? And isn't it true when that happens, that's all there is, yes or no? And then out of all there is and all that is in that moment, we talked about how then everything comes out of that. Then I know what's wrong, therefore I know how it got that way, therefore I know what to do so I don't have to face this moment again. Ignoring the fact that I have faced the same fear, the same anger, the same anxiety, the same enemies for millennia. I've faced them. So I want to look at this with you from another vantage point. Are you up for it? Now, I pointed out, and I have to do it briefly here, that this capacity on our part, that we are unconscious of, we are unconscious of our role in how our reality is established moment to moment. We are unconscious how the part we play in the meeting of these forces produces something that, instead of being freed by their interaction, creates the captivity of a sense of self caught up in that moment. Still tracking with me? I have to go through it rather quickly. And we said that this was beautifully stated in a way, because why would I want to do that? Emerson said that divinity is our birthright. I covered this with you. God nods to God from behind each of us, but let us remember, as divinity is behind our failures and follies too. So this celestial capacity to somehow or other not just be in the moment, but to have the moment in us in such a way that our relationship to the moment is defining our reality. Please? And so we love it on the one side. Divinity is our birthright. God nods to God from behind each of us. You go outside, the moment of beauty is so breathtaking, you disappear into that perfect unity between observer and observer. And there's no you, there's no that. There's just this beautiful awareness, a divine awareness of something that is taking place. And you happen to be, if you will, that little point of light that observes it, that experiences it. But what about divinity is behind our failures and follies also? That's a tougher nut to chew, isn't it? How can the divine be behind my failures and follies? Because the same gift that gives you the potential to be aware of your relationship to the present moment and your ability to share in the presence of that moment, that same ability gives you, without knowing it, a certain relationship to powers and principles that until you understand them, they make a prisoner out of you. And I'm going to show you how that's true. Therefore, if you understand it, you won't be trying to save yourself from these individual people, places, and problems. Instead, you'll want to be present to the part of yourself that is complicit in creating the illusion that everything has come down to a single point and that the only alternative is to suffer it. Have I set the stage properly? Because isn't it true that in that moment when all the possibilities there are, infinite, and actually if seen all at once, requires no choice at all, because you yourself are part of the unfolding possibility of what is new in that moment. If it's true that something in me takes that, what you said, what I saw on TV, and just puts it into a little nutcase, isn't it true that if I identify and go along with that, isn't that a form of self-sabotage? Yeah. Clearly it is. I'm acting against myself. I'm acting against my own higher possibilities. But the rub is, I don't know I'm doing it. And that's what we're going to look at a little deeper today. Now, transition. I don't know if you ever see stuff on like the internet. Sorry, that's about as elaborate as it gets for me. But it's an extraordinary thing that most men and women know more about the rules and the laws that govern cell phones, selfies, the social networks and the games, and how to just flat out lie to yourself about everything you see. That's the newest thing. Only our phone can turn ugliness into beauty. All you have to do is just push these buttons, and the person who's scowling is smiling. I can change everything, except for the fact that something in me has to keep changing everything so that I feel safe and secure. Why do I know more about those laws of my cell phone and technology than I do about the laws that govern my own heart and my own mind? Is that true or not? It wasn't always like that. It's never been, how should you say, it's never been in any shape or form a dominating, meaning a true and persistent understanding. But through the passage of time, certain ways in which these principles, particularly with regards to tonight's talk, how my failure to understand them, the divine laws produce failures and follies. People used to understand this a lot better than we do now. And by and large, men and women scoff at these things that I'm about to cover with you. But you take a proverb like what? Haste makes waste. You've all heard that, haven't you? You would even agree with it, would you not? How about pride goeth before a fall? How about better safe than sorry? Or people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Now, whether you know it or not, those adages, I guess they call them proverbs, those proverbs are the short-term expression of divine laws. But we don't understand that they are short expressions of divine laws because we don't understand the divine law behind them. And it's interesting because you get the knowledge, right? You get the feeling of those things. You like that, right? People behind with glass houses, that's pretty good. Because obviously if you live in a glass house, you shouldn't throw a stone. But everybody else throws stones, not I. And everybody else lives in a glass house where mine is like the three little piggies made of stone. What are those adages? What are those proverbs trying to teach us about these celestial principles? What is the divine law behind that idea? People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, or haste makes waste. What's the divine law behind that? Now I know that you're not going to guess it, so I'm leaving it rhetorical for a moment. But I will say that in a few minutes here, I'm going to bring the room into our dialogue, make our list, and I'm going to invite you to do so too. What are those adages, those proverbs trying to teach? They're trying to teach about a divine law called second force. Now, it's not complicated. Second force simply means that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That's what second force is. For every action, an equal and opposite reaction. I'll show you, though it's hard to see. Take your right hand and just press it against your left wrist. Do it. When you reach down and touch your wrist, unrealized by you is that your wrist is pushing back. You don't know that your wrist is pushing back because all you feel is an opposite of what's pushing. Do it with me, honestly. Does it feel to you like your wrist is pushing back, or are you only aware of the part that's pushing? That's all I'm aware of, part that's pushing. But under law, my wrist is pushing back with equal force to the pressure that I'm pushing on it against. It's there. That law permeates everything. So there's no moment where a human being isn't pushing that he or she isn't getting pushed back. It's under law. And the thing that's difficult to understand is that this is referring here physically, isn't it, to what you would call the physical manifestation, my fingers and my wrist, I'm pushing against it. But that law surely exists not just in the visible world, but in all of the invisible worlds as well, that we are always in and that are occupying us and that we are occupied with, so that without knowing it at all, every single time that we push, no matter what it is or the reason why we're pushing, there is going to be pushback, period, pure and simple. Now, take that idea, no such thing as a moment in time until it's collapsed into a thought. Neither is there any pushback, neither is there anything for you to resist until you have first insisted through a certain form of energy that you aren't aware of called desire. Always acting, always pushing, always pulling. Doesn't matter, pull or push, equal and opposite forces. Everybody getting the general gist of this? In all worlds. Simple example of what I'm talking about. And I want you to, actually participate, share in this with me, because I'm going to give you a few examples before we start building our list. How do you feel? Do you know somebody that when you see them walk into a room and they've got that strut going? You watch football. You watch some of these football players. It could be anybody. When you see a person who is the embodiment of arrogance, are you attracted to them or are you repelled by them? Now, I don't have time to go in this. Attraction and repulsion are the same thing. Because what you call repelled means you're attracted to the feeling of not liking them. No action without an equal and opposite reaction. So, but in large, so here I am, and why am I strutting my stuff, ladies? Come on, it's not just some stupid man who thinks he's the be-all, end-all. I'm dressed to the nines. My makeup is perfect, right, Charlie? I'm looking good. In that moment when I'm strutting my stuff, what am I thinking about everybody around me? How lucky you are that I'm walking into this room with you. You may not think that's going on. Now, how can you know that that's going on? And more importantly, what is the second force that is produced by my desire to be seen as special? What is the second? I don't know it's there. Do you understand? All I know is the one. I think on Sunday we're going to talk about background and foreground. But for now, all I know is the one. So here I am. All I know is the one, and I am Roger. I am the one. Never mind, you weren't there, Patricia, while Roger was talking in before class. I am the one. But what is your feeling about me as the one? Hello? I want to gag. I resist your arrogance. I don't believe in it. And when I resist your arrogance, there's your action, here is my reaction, opposites, yes or no. And then when I resist, what do you do with my resistance? I actually strengthen the assumption that something's wrong with you for not seeing me as the glorious human being that I am. Do you see that? So my revulsion actually heightens, and it gets more and more pinpointed to where something in me wants to do what to you? What do I want to do with you in that moment? Well, if I could get away with punishing you, I would. But basically, I want to say, what's wrong with you? Why can't you see yourself? Do you not understand, sir, that all of that arrogance is a product of fear? Because if you knew it was a product of fear, you wouldn't strut around like that. And it's true. It is fear acting, isn't it? So here's fear, and it is trying to escape itself through an appearance. And the more it pushes to appear the way it does, the more pushback it gets, attracting exactly the opposite of what it expected. Do you see that with me? How about a child in the dark, in a room? A child's fear of the dark proves the fear the child feels. A child's fear of the dark proves the fear the child feels. Do you see that? So here's the kid, and he reacts, and every single bump in the night does what to that child? It strengthens that child's illusion that the source of fear is somewhere out there under the bed or in the closet, doesn't it? So here is the bump in the night. The only thing the child knows how to do is to not want it, to fear it. And the more the child fears the thing, the more it pushes against and resists the condition, the more the condition is solidified in the child's mind as being real. So that's a form of self-sabotage, isn't it? Wouldn't any form of fear be self-sabotage if what I'm describing to you is true? How about this one? How many of you rush? You're not rushing to get your hands up in the air, I can tell you that. One of the great axioms, absolute proof of second force. Who knows what it is? Haste makes waste. Now, why does haste make waste? Anybody?
Because I'm not paying attention.
Well, Barbara said, because I'm not paying attention. No, why does haste make waste? What is my haste? I want to get through whatever it is. I want the pleasure as fast as I can. I want the pain to go away as quickly as I can. Anxiety. Haste makes waste. But what is the waste made out of the haste?
Lost opportunity.
Not just lost opportunity. The waste made out of the haste is in that moment, I am actually, without knowing it, sabotaging myself by, through that haste, creating more and more conditions that if I'd just done it the right way, I wouldn't have to do it again. Were you ever in a rush to eat something and you spilled what you had made? And what happens then? Do you go, oh, look, I spilled what I made? Or do you go, let me see. That's it. Out comes what? Please try to understand this. What is frustration but the release of the pain produced by a person stuck in the opposites, believing if they can get through something, they'll be free of their pain, and then find out they can't, and boom, out comes all of that vitriol, and Vicks Vapo Rub. Haste makes waste. And again, connected to that, haste makes waste. Do you remember these old knives? A stitch in time saves 9. Isn't that haste makes waste? So somebody was saying what? Look, if you just take your time and make the right stitch here, you're not going to have to undo everything that came after it. You'll save all of that time if you don't do what? Sabotage yourself by trying to rush through something in order to get to something that the more you want to get to it, the further it slides away. Even Paul Simon knew this. The nearer your destination, the more you sliding away. That might be a proverb, right? Are you ready to share now? Let's bring up the list that we're going to create. Hold on, Patricia. My wife's already got her hand up. We're going to get to you. But you pushing me might make you last now. Here's the list we're going to make, and I'm inviting all of you out there to join in. Name one or some of the ways where, given our study this evening, you suspect your actions and choices accordingly may be creating second force and, as such, are at the root of unseen self-sabotage. Now, I gave you some good examples. I've got a whole bunch of them to go through. Look, before I have you come on, why do this? Why do this? Why look at this? Because unless we look at it, we will continue to be the unwitting instrument of an unconscious nature that is wielding divine forces and weaving us into a prison that we don't know is being made from our own actions, because we are identified with the movement that says, go, do, get. This is that idea, and I'm not going to have time to go into it. You can't serve two masters. You will love one and despise the other. You can't serve the opposites one at a time. Do you see that? I want. If you just serve I want, what do you get? You get the opposing force. This is my desire. It's so important. What do I get? By nature, I will get something that opposes that desire. Do you see it? You can't, or I don't want this. You can't not want something without creating an opposing force. It's impossible. So, let's go on. Who's got Patricia?
It takes one to know one.
Oh, are we doing?
That was my favorite thing to yell at people as a kid. It takes one to know one.
We were.
I can't decide whether to share this with you out there or not. Name what? Name. My wife said, it takes one to know one. She used to like saying that to people that were negative to her. And in one respect, what she's saying is that my response was an opposite of their unkindness. So it was equally unkind. Got it? I want to make sure to save your bacon here, okay? So let's go back to what this list is. Name one or some of the ways where you suspect your actions, choices are creating second force. How many of you are afraid of making a mistake? So if I'm afraid of making a mistake, what's the second force connected with the fear of making a mistake? Essentially, the more I'm afraid of making a mistake, the more mistakes I'm going to make, because my attention is all riveted in trying to be safe. Anybody else here? Ellen.
Doing things to make people like you always pushes them.
A big one, wanting approval. Have you not seen, and you haven't, or you wouldn't be seeking the approval of people. If you're not seeing, the more you want people to approve of you, the greater your fear that they don't. And the greater your fear that people don't approve of you drives you to do what? To do more things they won't approve of. Because you sit there and you emit this weakness. What happens when Mr. Howard used to say, weakness pounces weakness. That's an example of opposing forces. Second force, weakness pounces weakness. Chris.
Going to talk to people with too much intensity or force, then it pushes them away. You asked for personal examples.
Oh, God. I'm trying not to push back here. So what Chris basically said was bringing too much force to bear when I try to tell people what they have to do to make me happy. That's the bottom line, is I live with certain demands that I don't know I live with. I have no awareness in me that it is a demand. And it always expresses itself in the character of some form of demand where I think I'm being forceful or very powerful in my presentation. But the fact of the matter is, what do you get when you meet someone with a demand? What is the second force that exists in any moment where you demand something of another person? What do you get? Instantaneous resistance. And then you blame them, instead of understanding that they are under the same laws that you are and incapable of responding as anything other than the opposite of what you present them with. You don't see it. Because if you saw it, number one, you would actually know how to talk to people, which you don't. Like, how about this for an example of second force? How many of you try to make sure that nothing rocks the boat? Now, what's second force to not rocking the boat? A storm, as the boat swamped, because you not wanting to rock the boat means I don't want you to get negative, because if you get negative, I'm going to get negative. So the more I try to be a peacemaker, the more perturbed I am because you're not following suit in that moment. Let me go to the board here quickly. Jane says, put a time demand when something should be done. Yeah, that creates second force, doesn't it? I want this when I want that. Wanting to be the first in line, any line. No, I want to go over that. Doug. All of us, yes or no, expecting differential treatment. Differential, yeah. I expect to be treated in a certain way. And if I walk into a restaurant, I don't know why you're not throwing everything on the floor and running over to the table where I am. Please, wherever I go, I expect deferential treatment. Do you not? By the way, it's not just Doug. Some of us are worse than others, but yes or no? Now, when I'm sitting at my table, you ever see people moving their leg up and down like this? And I tell myself, I'm not going to make a comment to the waitress because I'm not that kind of person. So already I have put myself in a place of second force because I'm already resisting my own nature. And finally she walks over, or Barbara walks in the house, one or the other. and what happened in that moment? When I say something to get the deferential treatment I expect, do I get deferential treatment? What do I get? Nothing. I get, okay, you're going to be the last table that gets their food. In fact, I'm going to see that people who came in later than you did are going to get their food. Doesn't that really irritate you when you walk in and you're saying there are people who come in after you and they're getting their food? Does that not set you off? So here I am. I have a force that's opposing this moment, and then the waitress walks over. And what does she get from me? She gets negativity. Does my negativity produce a favorable response? So am I not sabotaging myself with that second force? Terry, let's go to the board.
Boasting and bragging, over bragging.
Any form of bragging. any form of exaggeration, actually, you may not, see, you don't know when you're exaggerating because you're so full of yourself in the moment of exaggerating what you are, it doesn't even dawn on you that they're going, oh God, more of that. So instead of getting the respect that you hope for your exaggerated state or whatever the condition is, you get exactly the opposite. Do you not get that? And then when people don't seem to swallow whatever it is you're selling, then what is your reaction to them not buying what you're selling? More of it. John.
This is simple but very concrete. Trying to hit a golf ball really hard and really far.
Okay, what John said applies to certain individuals. But it's not just a golf ball that you're trying to hit straight and hard, John. It's any moment where you're striking at something in this life to get it go the way you want to. And when you already know how it's supposed to go, you've already created second force. Right? In the expectation is the fear. In the demand is the fear. I got to get over the board. Debbie, trying to make someone like me, we did that. Wanting to be silent or left alone. Yeah, okay, Namita, that's right. All I want is to be left alone. And by that very nature, what happens anytime, just simple business, simple person, what comes up? You meet them with resistance. You blame them for the disturbance in you. What's the real source of the disturbance other than the demand that you be left alone? Steve, rushing to stop rushing, because I'm not, yes, rushing, of course. Pleasing people. Janice is trusting others. I'm not sure about trusting others, creating second force, although it can. Patricia?
I have two. First one, trying to show off with a new dress or a car or something,
Showing off.
and they hate you. And the second one is unsolicited advice.
Now there's a good one. Where do I attract, where do I create second force? Giving unsolicited advice. Now you may not, they may not, like they may want something from you, so they're going, yeah, okay, like that. But more than anything, while they're going, like that, what are they doing? Shut up. Please, I didn't ask, don't tell. To the board, self-doubt, uncertainty, decision-making, resisting interruptions. Robert, ignoring what the body needs creates second force. That's actually not bad. Ignoring what the body needs, we'll state it the other way around. Not attending to my health because I don't want to be bothered by it or whatever. That creates second force, doesn't it? What's the second force of not attending properly to my health? A disruption in the immune system. Thinking I can, that's a big one. Wanting to control everyone and everything. I mean, that kind of summarizes the whole story, doesn't it? And what is the second force connected to wanting to control you? What's the second force? What, John? Who died and made you God? Okay. What wants to control? Fear. So fear is the active force. The opposite of fear is that which validates the fearful nature, that which comes up and basically pushes back. So the more I try to control you, the more you resist control. And you can see this loop in all of these things. How about trying to take the easy way? Isn't that a place where we create second force all the time? Try to take the easy way. And you know what happens when you try to take the easy way? It turns into the hard way, doesn't it? How about expecting, how shall I say it? I'll say it this way. Lying. Isn't lying the instantaneous creation of a second force? And not just the person who may suspect that you're lying, but the very action of putting that lie out into the world that you wouldn't do unless you were identified and afraid of loss of some kind. The very action, that's what I'm trying to show you, is that the people and the places and the problems that appear are manifestations of the energies that are operating and producing through them the conditions that you oppose. No one opposes you that isn't the instrument of an opposing force. There's no one there that opposes you. That's why Christ said, resist not evil. Do not oppose what opposes you. Because in the very act of opposing, you create second force. Or in the act of trying to escape that problem, you still create the very opposite again that you have to go through. Yes, do you understand? Yeah. What about pretense? What happens when you see somebody pretending to be all that? What goes through you? You want to put them in their place, don't you? So they have attracted in that moment. Here's a really good example of that. All of us, maybe we've been this person, maybe we've not. But you're in your car, you're on a street someplace, or you're on the freeway, and here comes somebody and they're curb sneaking or they're cutting in and out because they're obviously a very important person and on their way to something very critical. They're speeding, yes or no? Now, what happens when 3 blocks, 3 miles down the road, you get off and that person's still there at the stoplight? What happens to when he endangered people perhaps? He set them off, didn't he? So first of all, his anxiety produced second force, didn't it? So now he sits there and here comes the people in whom he created second force. And then what happens to him when they go like this? When they give him the look. What happens inside of him? What's wrong with you? He has no notion that he has created the enmity that he's experiencing in that moment. None. Because he was fully focused. Thought had collapsed everything into his particular desire, and that desire took nothing into account except for the fact that that desire produces a second force. And it always will produce a second force. Any other hands? Wayne.
Defending an opinion when challenged.
Well, that was elaborate. Defending an opinion when challenged. How about just being endlessly defensive, Wayne? Unless you say something I agree with, I'm going to let you have it. Yes? Is that not true? Impatience. Now, how am I doing? I'm not going to be able to go through. You wouldn't believe all the list that came in. And how many of you didn't get? Anybody have anything very special they want to? Sally? Dependency. Of course. Anytime I'm dependent upon another person, it creates second force. And so does codependency. You can look at all of these things. I don't want you to miss the idea that I am an organism, a level of being that is itself the marriage of and the expression of these forces. And when I express one force at the expense of another, when I'm identified with one position as opposed to another, in that moment, without knowing it, I have placed myself karmically where that relationship is going to have to be reconciled by something that opposes me. It has to happen. But when you are opposed by someone or something, what's your position in that moment? Anybody? When push comes to shove, what follows? Push back. This is what we don't get. You know those little sarcastic remarks that you like to make? You don't see that the moment that comes out of your mouth, you have received, though no one may say it because whatever, they're afraid of you or whatever. No one will say. In that moment, you have received the opposite of what you thought you would get for your superior remark. I'm going to put you down. I'm going to show you your proper place. In that moment, it is you who are put into the place of someone who has collapsed all the possibilities in that moment into a single identity that feels for a split second, listen to this, validated because the response to what you said proves that you were right. No, the response to what you said doesn't prove that you're right. The response proves that for every shove there's a push and every push there's a shove. That's what it proved. Only we're always just the push or the shove, aren't we? Bring up the second key lesson. I need to get to the exercise. This is a summary, and then I have a little story and give you the exercise. You ready? The more any part of us doesn't want to see, let alone rejects the experience of some negative I that appears in an unwanted moment, the more that I pushes back on the experience it doesn't want. What this false sense of self can't see, but that we must if we ever hope to be free, is that the more this I denies the painful experience of itself, the more it affirms the suffering it's struggling to avoid. Too much? Do I desire you to be a certain way because I'm happy with you? So if I desire you to be a certain way, what do I get from my desire? Pushback. Now I think my suffering is because you aren't the way I want you to be. So the more I try to make you into what I want you to be, the more you push back, the more you push back, the more I affirm the suffering that I didn't see that began the whole relationship. That's the explanation of that key lesson. Does that help? I don't know if it's having the intended impact. You're buffeted about and you don't know you're buffeted about. You know what being buffeted means, don't you? You're buffeted about. Your own thoughts buffet you about. And that's an extraordinary thing. But we don't know that our own thoughts, our own desires buffet us about. Because when I have that thought or that desire, I am just the one side of the equation. And I can't see that there's no such thing as one side of the equation without the other side being present. I don't see it. So the more I think about what's wrong with my life, the more I experience what I don't want. Not the very opposite that I think I'm going to get when I get everything straightened out. It's just built into that consciousness. It opposes itself. Now, how does an individual, have we reached some understanding about this? At least to make us a little bit more aware of what's going on? If I can see that at all, what does my new action have to be? We think that when we want something or don't want something, that the wanting or the not wanting is actually an action that we are taking. Do you not? When you want or don't want something, it is not an action that you are taking. It is the result of an action that has taken place inside of you that you don't know. And that wanting or not wanting is to try to free you from the opposition you felt in the moment where something came and brought you that sudden state, that quality or character became present to you. Because when is it that I want you to be different? Is when I'm happy with you? So even if I'm not with you and I'm thinking about what's wrong with you, am I not still, one way or the other, trying to get to a place where I can get this clear in my mind that I can get you to be who I want you to be, and then this pain is going to go away? But it never goes away, and it can't go away. Here's two farmers. And one of the farmers, relatively new to the kingdom, I don't have time to go all this, but relatively new to the kingdom, and he's there 2-3 years, and he notices that the other farmer, for whatever reason, his fields, I mean, he spends like 2% of the time that he spends weeding all of the crops. And he can't understand why the one farmer has such a pest-free, weed-free harvest. Finally, it bothers him enough, and he checks it out. He buys the seed from the same place. So what's the problem? So he finally goes to his neighbor and he says, I'd like to understand why while I have to spend all of my time weeding and I don't like it, you spend hardly any time at all doing that. What do you know that I don't know? And the neighbor says, well, Said, for one thing, before I plant the seeds, I always shine a bright light on them and sort them out so I know the difference between a seed and a weed. And then what do you think the guy says? But I don't have time to do that. Isn't that second force? Now, what does it mean that before I sow the seed, I make sure that it's a good seed? That's what your work is about, is this, the awakening of this awareness that allows you to recognize that at all points in time, if I am, yes or no, how many of you understand this? I'm taken over. If you're anxious, you've been taken over. If you're afraid, you've been taken over. If you're rushing, you've been taken over. If you have an enemy, you've been taken over. Anytime that you feel something come over you, you need to see in that moment, what do you need to see? Something is shoving you. Do you understand? If I'm fighting against something, it's because something is pushing against me. Something is shoving me. It's telling me, you have to be afraid. You have to worry here. You can't let this go on like that. You must stand up for yourself. Something's shoving me, isn't it? Now, my whole life, what do I do when something shoves me? Push back. Only it never occurs to me that what I'm pushing back against in that moment has nothing whatsoever to do with what I think is, with the consciousness that's producing the sensation of being shoved. What's being shoved? My past, my memories, my identity, my beliefs, my images. That's all that's shoved, isn't it? My expectations shoved by any moment that doesn't agree with them. And by the very fact that I have them, creates second force. Identification creates second force. Can you see that at all? Because what is identification other than I believe that I must have, do, or be whatever it is that I brought into this moment with me. And if the moment comes along as an opposite, incidentally, to reconcile this mistaken consciousness, the minute that consciousness is stirred by that moment, it never thinks to itself the moment came to help reconcile the misunderstanding it has about itself. Instead, it pushes back against the condition the reactions point to as the source of the pain. So what's the exercise? Pretty simple. Don't let push come to shove. Don't do it. Not because you're strong and not because you're wise, but because to whatever extent it's true for you, you can see that whenever you push back against any condition, what is pushing back is not you, but an opposite of something produced by an unconscious nature resisting summarily whatever the source that it says is the cause of that pain. Then you have a chance. Do you understand? You have a chance to actually be present in that moment to the fact that you are, without knowing it, have always just thrown in the towel, whatever it is, I sabotaged myself. And just see it. Why? Because you can experience, listen, instead of being identified with pushing back when something shoves you, you can experience the push as inseparable from the shove. You can begin to understand that that which is shoving you around can never be resolved by you pushing back against it. It can't. Those are opposites, aren't they? Push, shove. Shove, push. Can shove resolve push? What about push? Can that fix shove? Well, my freedom when I'm being shoved is push back, isn't it? Or when something's pushing me, my freedom is to shove. Isn't that what I think? No side of the opposites can free you. Freedom is seeing the opposites at the same time. That's what freedom is. Because then you're not playing the instrument, the dim-witted, unconscious instrument of a set of forces that are divine in nature. Do you understand? If these forces are divine in nature, you get that much, don't you? If these forces are actually divine in nature, and I can be present to them, and instead of serving this unconscious nature that serves itself by push or shove, instead become the instrument of the awareness of these opposites, then I'm in a completely different relationship with all of those forces, with the divine itself. Then I'm serving something that never sabotages me, but that saves me from myself every time I'm aware of it. Did we learn something? I hope so. Let's take a break, we'll come back and have our dialogue.
Welcome back, everyone. Just want to have a couple announcements. A reminder that all of these classes, these online talks, are sponsored by the nonprofit Life of Learning Foundation here in Southern Oregon. And if you'd like to help us, please know that every donation you make, no matter the size, is very helpful. So you can make a donation at any time at guyfinley.org/donate. And by the way, if you go to that page, there's other ways you can donate that also don't cost you a thing that would help the foundation. So go to that page and look it over a little bit. It has some good information on it. But we appreciate all of you who now are supporting us weekly, and I invite anyone who has felt these ideas are helping you and know they'll help others as well. So we appreciate your support in that way. Just a couple other quick things. Friday night is our study group with longtime students or students who been around here for a while, and it's on the Talk from Sunday, and you're welcome to come in. It's a great time to explore the Talk from Sunday. If you haven't listened to it, you can do that on the guyfinley.org/channel and listen to that anytime and join in. We have a discussion of these to where we talk about what we see, and it's very valuable. And also tonight's talk, there's another talk on Monday night, and Monday nights are for Wisdom School people. And if you'd like to join the Wisdom School, it's very inexpensive and very profitable to be a part of, and you can do that by reaching out to guyfinley.org/wisdom. You guys are so fast, got it right there. So do take advantage of that, and we will be discussing on Monday night what we talk about tonight. So we want to be able to embed these ideas into ourselves and make them more than just books on a shelf, but something that we're using. All right, so let us, I did want to mention, don't forget Saturday mornings, Insight Timer. You will get reminders for all of these as Sunday classes as well. So thanks for joining us. And now is the time for our Q&A with Guy. So let's bring Guy on and see if he has anything to say. Guy, would you like to say anything more?
Just ever so briefly, isn't this coming Saturday also?
Yes, at 1:30.
I know that should be announced, shouldn't it?
Yes, it should.
Yeah.
My fault.
Uh,
I'll tell Doug and he'll say.
okay, thanks. So are you ever disappointed with, it's like starting a commercial. Are you ever disappointed with people? Can there be disappointment without judgment? Can there be judgment without comparison? So the pain of disappointment isn't because of what the other person did, but because they don't match your idea of who they should be. That's self-sabotage. And not only is it self-sabotage, but it puts you in a place with anybody that disappoints you as someone who will feel your disappointment in them and then respond accordingly, another opposite. The takeaway from the talk before we open it up is very simple. Honestly, it is. I asked you when I started the talk, I said, why do we do this? Why do we make these kind of examinations, particularly on Wednesdays? Do you remember I said? It must dawn on you, and it must be more like the light that broke inside of St. Paul on the road to Damascus. It must dawn on you. The only thing you suffer over is what you do not know about yourself. That's it. That's it. You have no other reason for suffering other than what you have yet to explore and understand about the operation of your own nature. Even physical suffering, because that's a big one for a lot of us. How does not wanting to feel the way I feel, what does that create a second force? Not wanting to feel the way I do? And what is the second force created by resisting the way I feel? What is the second force? Feeling worse. Not only feeling worse, but using my energy without knowing it, my energy being used to resist a condition that if at least I was present to it, might produce some new understanding about what's going on. I know people who, when they get sick, their answer to getting sick is eating more of the food that makes them sick. That's second force. I'm going to exchange pleasure for pain. Except you can't exchange pleasure for pain, because when you exchange pleasure for pain, second force proves and promises you're going to get what? More of the pain that made you seek the pleasure. Self-knowledge. And you can't gain self-knowledge running around in this world distracted by the things that you are distracted by. It is impossible. So it begs the question, what is it that I'm going to be in service to? What am I going to do with my life? It's the same question all the time. You have to answer that. I'm just presenting to you the big picture so that you can make, God willing, a profitable choice and action. Okay, Doug.
Okay, and here is the announcement that I didn't give, and that's Saturday at 1:30 Pacific, guys, having a discussion here with the group here in the at the foundation, and you're invited to join us on Facebook and YouTube, and you will get a reminder about that as well. So this Saturday, a special one, once a month, 1:30 Pacific, a discussion with Guy. So let's get going. Let's raise our hands now if you're on GoToWebinar, and just click on your hand icon. I see Tony is there. And raise your hand now if you'd like to talk with Guy about anything or just express some gratitude. And also, if you'd like to write a question, do write it in the chat boxes or the question box here in GoToWebinar. So I'm going to start with Tony, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Doug. You rock.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, Guy. This talk that you gave tonight is really important, because the answer, what you're trying to get us to, is resistance is futile. It's just futile. And so that leads me to a potential existential crisis.
Yes, it does.
Of nihilism. I mean, why do I care? I mean, what's the whole point?
Yeah, I know.
So how do you address that?
I'm happy to address it. The existential crisis is a crisis of identity. And if it weren't for the false identity, there'd be no crisis. So that every crisis serves the purpose of revealing the false identity, so that one day you can finally be free of identifying with it. There's another world, Tony. It's not, I know you're educated, you have spiritual understanding, you've been down the road, I know it. We've talked now for some time, and I'm always glad to do it. But there is actually another world. If it weren't true, I wouldn't say it to you. There is another world. And you just don't understand yet that that other world isn't something that you are in, it is in you. And that when you are a citizen of, when you are connected to that other world, it is because you have broken through literally the illusion that this world is somehow inseparable from my identification with it. So that the other world throws open its doors as you see through the illusion of your understanding as being the only understanding there is. There's an understanding that doesn't have you in it at all. There's an understanding that doesn't have you in it at all. You're just part of it. And in that understanding, Right and wrong, left and right, up and down, they have their place relative to one world, but the world that sits above that allows those things to take place, and it sees the futility of trying to change the left through the right, and the right through the left, and the hatred through the love. It sees the futility of trying to use an opposite to bludgeon the other opposite into its proper place. It sees that. And then there's nothing nihilistic in it. It is the negation of one world. Then you're still in this world, Tony. Then, person, I'm here. But my heart and my mind are someplace else. And the more that your attention and what you love in life is spent cultivating, enhancing, enriching the relationship with another order of mind. See, you think that your thoughts about another order of mind is another order of mind. And it's not. Another order of mind sees the futility of using thought to try to resolve the pain. Because it sees the pain as the result of thought that always operates in the opposites. It sees that. Persist, Tony. Persist.
So why should we care about this world?
Why should you care about this world? Because you're not human if you don't. That's why.
Maybe we're not.
No.
I don't know.
Don't fight with me, Tony. We're doing so well. Don't fight with me. Love doesn't have sides, Tony.
I know that.
Well, no, so you see,
That's my point.
If you knew that, then you wouldn't say, then what's the point? Let love have its way. Let love have its way. Not Tony have her way with what she thinks is love, because that's where enmity comes from. That's the very crux of the existential crisis, is that what I love is not being met by what I think love is. So love,
You're saying the energy that love entails is what we should be focusing on, and not the identity of ourselves. Something like that.
You can't focus on that energy. You can only die to everything that's not it. You can't focus on love. There's no one there to focus on love. The more I focus on love, the more unloving I am when people don't love the way I want them to. See, everything, Tony, and you just have to go through it. Everybody in the room. Tony is us, isn't she? I'm having an existential crisis. That's what the dark night of the soul is, this beautiful, immense, horrible, existential crisis where if I keep going here, I'm not going to exist. What's the purpose if I don't exist? And then you'll understand, you never existed. But you had this idea and this purpose generated by the promises of the world that are fully conditioned in you. That's all there is, and that's all there was. And it has to go away. The light has to obliterate the whole illusion of a separate self. And you say that's what you want, but man, when it starts to happen, I'm in an existential crisis here. Give me a cookie. Yeah. All right, Tony. I'm glad you asked the question. Always good to talk to you. On we go, Doug.
Thank you.
All right, Guy, here is a comment from Claudia. And she says, I feel pushed by this anxious mind when it projects some problem with the question, how are you going to answer this? This morning, the seeing revealed that that was the root of the anxiousness, thinking I need to answer it.
Yes. Yes. What is second force to my endless seeking of certainty? What is the second force? I want certainty. What is second force to that? Everything constantly proving to me that I can't have what I want. And the more I can't have what I want, the more I feel like I really need that. And the more I need that, the more I pursue it. And the more I pursue it, I am an instrument of the opposite that believes it can save itself through the opposite it imagines. We see these, we look at these circles of unconsciousness creating the pain that it tries to resolve. Yes, Claudia. On we go, Doug.
leftover question, Guy. This is actually from last week. And Julie, this is referring to you used the phrase from Rumi, the antidote is in the venom.
Yes.
And so Julie asked, is the antidote radical acceptance and openness?
Look, I could just say yes and be done with it, but I can't. The reason the antidote is in the venom is because being poisoned is an illusion produced by identifying with one of the opposites. That's why the antidote is in the venom. The antidote is the disappearance of the person who feels that something is pushing or shoving them. So the reason the antidote is in the venom is because when the person finally sees that, they stop pushing back. And when they stop pushing back, lo and behold, antidote and venom as opposites disappear, because now they are the embodiment of those principles instead of being pushed around by them. Okay. It's the best I can do right now.
All right, here's another leftover question from Frida. She says, hello, Guy. There is something in me that only longs to do fun things, and the other side that wants to listen to the talks. But sometimes it just doesn't work out. I see now that this is the same consciousness. I thought it was me who wanted to watch the talk, but there was something in me that only talked about it. Doing it is something else. Is that right?
I think so. You know, my heart sometimes, it swells up so big, and then to try to express in words the opening. If it's true, Frida and everybody, if it's true that on one hand there is this endless wish to explore, you could say the endless wish to have fun, get out there and do stuff and, you know, gather these impressions and all the rest of that, and you can't stop that. It's just moving that way. But if it's moving that way, by the very fact that it's moving that way, there is an opposing force to it. And the opposing force in this instance, as we described, here's this expansiveness, here's this contraction. So on one hand, I don't want the pain of the contraction. I want to free myself, so I think to myself, spiritual. I want to be free of this pain. I don't want to be troubled anymore. I want to escape the madness of this world. The contradictions are driving me crazy. I want to be Buddha. I want to be Christ. I want to be free. So here is this wish to be free born out of what? Here is this wish to be free born out of what? Resisting this contraction. That's where all the gods came from, is the resistance of a divine force. So here, all this resistance. And now, on the other side of it, I think to myself, well, I want these talks. I understand them, some of them. I kind of get it. I like it. But this wish to expand is in direct confrontation with this contraction. They're fighting each other. And I don't know, where to go. And I've seen it my whole life. I've been teaching now for over 40 years. Yeah, over 40 years. Coming on 45 years shortly, February. All I see all the time is people come, oh, this is beautiful, I love this, and poof, gone. Just like out the door. Why? Why does that happen? Because I can't have both worlds. I thought I could have both because I'd become a spiritual giant in a world of little people. But real spirituality is understanding that there is no little people, there's just people with no understanding, and that you and I are one of those people with no understanding. And the cost of gaining understanding is doing what? This goes back to what Tony was asking me. What is the cost of gaining real understanding? Negation. That's the cost of gaining real understanding, is the negation of the whole idea that I understand. Because in scale and relative to the world, I might have some superior understanding. How many of you think you have some superior understanding? Well, intellectually, most of you do. The truth is, most of my students have more understanding than people who've gone to school to become psycho-fuddy-duddies. Honestly. But what does it do me? So that's my answer to Frida, and we have Terry at the microphone.
Hi everyone, my name is Terry. I actually had an experience on Monday that ties really well with this class tonight. So I had to work with a mom and her special needs child for 4 hours on Monday. So done with that, I go to another job on Tuesday, and about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I get an email from that mom from Monday, 5 paragraphs accusing me. There you go for a second force, being accused.
Yes.
Right? So accusing me of something, and then after all that, the last paragraph, but I so appreciate you and I do want to hear your side of the story. So, of course, the tornado starts, but there was something in me in that moment. If not now, when? If not now, when? And I had to work really, really hard, and then she asked me to call her. And so when I got home from that other job, I called her. And right in the onset, she started interrupting me. There's another second force. She started interrupting me, so I had to work with myself right then to not give back that same attitude about judging her for interrupting me, just to actually say to her kindly, I would like to answer your question. If I may please just continue that through it, and I'll do the same for you. You can respond. And it was a very nice conversation. And I tell you, I can see how I haven't worked as diligently as I should.
Good.
Ready for a question? Someone in the queue, Guy?
Yeah, I was just, the Beatitudes were just going through my mind. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those that mourn. How can me discovering the poverty of my spirit be a blessing? Unless I discover that who and what I thought I wasn't blessed the way that I imagine I am, with this great strength and fortitude and wisdom and assertiveness. And there I'm left, if I'm working in between these two states and knowing that I've missed the mark already inwardly. Now what can I do? How can I use, and you'll understand this, how can I use this moment to enter into the last thing that I want from this moment, which is self-awareness? And that's the first thing we should want. Yes, Doug?
All right, we have 2 in the queue and one more question.
All right.
We're about 7:25. So we're going to take South African Debbie here.
Yeah, I know.
Hi, Guy.
Hi.
So I just want to thank you for this talk. Well, I would say, it can practically apply to every single relationship that we have in every moment, On this trip, there have been moments where I'll say something to someone, says something to someone, and get the exact opposite reaction to what it's expecting, which is entering the moment with a demand, correct?
The basis of most familial relationship is second force.
Yeah. So just the reminder to just watch is so important. This has been just so helpful. I just want to thank you,
Okay,
as usual.
I'd like to hear you say something in Afrikaner.
Wibale. That means thank you. In actually, it's in Uganda, but there are so many languages here. Like they have 12 different languages.
Okay, that's a little more than I need to know. Be safe, Debbie. We'll see you when you get home.
Thanks, Guy. Yeah.
All right, let's take a written question here, and this is from Rebecca. She says, "Hi, Guy and everyone. I feel like I need a more simplistic living environment to allow me more spaciousness, less buffeting, to be with and live these principles. Like my current crucible is too much." Any thoughts about this?
Oh, yeah. Sell all. Now I know that you have responsibilities. You can't sell those. But a great part of the journey is the gradual clarification as to the unseen second force in what we call our necessities. Now I know that was clear. I wonder if anybody understood it. I remember the first time Mr. Howard, he was talking, and I remember my reaction really clearly. I was living in a house in Malibu, and he said, "All you need is a little room with a window and a chair and some tea overlooking the freeway." I remember, those are almost the words themselves. That's how impactful that was on me. And, you know, did he create second force with that comment in me or anybody else? Does not sell all and follow me, does that instantly create second force? But what was he saying? He was saying that what you believe are your necessities are the source of the second force that you suffer from. Because you believe that without those things, you aren't you. And I would argue strenuously that if there's anything that you have to make you believe in you, to produce the mirrors that you like to look in, and we all have these mirrors, not just ones where we look at our face, but where we see the evidence of our life. Tony, what if life doesn't need to be validated by any reflection? And more importantly, if life is only validated by a reflection, then the thing that changes the reflection then changes my sense of self, doesn't it? So it's all grist for the mill, Rebecca. You have a good head on your shoulders and a good heart. Follow it. See where it leads you. Risk some things. Don't get highfalutin ideas. Just see what it is that on any given day you might be able to live without. Start without this idea of how people have to be or how this should unfold. Just start with the simplest things. You can't sell everything right away because this consciousness is what's clinging. Eventually, if you do that, you'll start to see with greater clarity that this consciousness is in fact a Klingon, a strange creature from Star Trek. Over to you, Doug.
All right, Guy, I'll read you the final question, but before that, Rebecca had a tongue-in-cheek response to your comments. She says, I respectfully request a more palatable answer.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? That is so true. Over to you, Doug.
All right, here is our last question, comment, and this comes from Scott. You just mentioned Vernon Howard, and he says Vernon Howard in one of his talks said, your new reaction is no reaction at all, which is what Guy explained this evening. No push or the opposite shove. Go with nothing, neither push or shove. No reaction at all. So again, as Guy said, we are not the yin or yang, but the gray line between them. To be saved is to be in the gray line, no? To see there is no you to save, yes? Seems like churches cement us to the yin-yang.
It's true enough what you said. But the danger in all of these things is that there's still a me that wants to be the gray. There's still a me that thinks it can balance or have no reaction. There's no such self that can have no reaction. But there is an order of self that can see the futility of identifying with the reactions, and in the clarity of that futility, find the freedom from identifying with them. Good night.